I just said I are live because apparently if I'm lazy and don't get on my laptop and stream from my phone, and yes, I can stream from my phone, but apparently if I do such things, it's kind of interesting because I can't share the stream very well. I'm trying to, but I don't think I can. So that's a bummer. So I hope you guys can see the screen that I edited here, because that matters a lot. Because it's the whole point of it all. Oh my goodness. A couple things. It just was. I think once in a while, I think that as we meander through life and we explore different ideas and things like that, sometimes I think it's okay to explore ideas and to meander through and discuss various things. Sometimes they can be about the Bible, and sometimes it can be about philosophy, all sorts of things. In this case, I was going to talk about a little bit, I'm going to try to stay on track, a little bit on the difference between what is lawful and what's beneficial. And so, hopefully, if anybody's watching this stream, if you could give me a shout out and let me know if you're actually seeing, because I'm on my phone, if you're actually seeing the screen or some terrible picture. Not picture of Wonder Woman and a gallbladder, but I mean like a terrible picture like it's of my pillow right now, or something like that. Let me know. But or leave. That's cool. Well, I'm just gonna go for it. I'm just gonna assume that people can see what I have up on the screen, and I'm gonna move out in faith. And otherwise people are going to have to hear my lovely skills on reading this. So, this is in Corinthians. Though I am free and I belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. To the Jews, I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law, I became like one under the law, though myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law, I became like one not having the law. To the weak I became the weak to win the weak. I become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do this for the sake of the gospel, that I might share its blessing. I'll read this part one more time. I have become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do this for the sake of the gospel. Context before this. When I was with the Jews under the law, I followed the law. When I was with the Gentiles not under the law, I didn't follow the law. What Paul's explaining here is that he's trying not to add extra on top of the gospel, and that he is trying to not be a stumbling block to somebody that might be disturbed by something. So Paul might have the freedom to not follow the Jewish law. That's his freedom. Some people call this term in theology high liberty. It says high liberty to be able to not have to follow the law. I mean, it's pretty awesome, right? High liberties, in the modern day, some people describe high liberties as things that aren't necessarily struck down in the Bible as wrong. Some people describe a high liberty as, say, having a beer. It's a high liberty. Drunkenness is spoken bad about, but there are high liberties that we have. But those high liberties sometimes become a stumbling block in different situations. An example, and I'll use alcohol as an example just because I have had loved ones who have struggled with this in person. And I am somebody that can have a beer and a good whiskey. I like it. I don't need it to socialize. And so I always am very open to the idea if, like, I know somebody that is going through recovery, it's not worth it for me to have that beer. I don't care. We could grab a soda and I'm cool, and so that's, one of those things. To me, having a beer is a high liberty. And for me, at this point in my life and my experiences, I've never had a problem abusing it. But that high liberty of having a beer might actually be, I might have the moral imperative to me. I'll have a tugging of my heart and feel compelled not to have a beer if I feel like I'm with somebody that maybe is struggling with that issue, because I don't want to be a stumbling block. Now, there's another side to that. Being that I worked in church for 15 years, they actually made us sign a thing at that point when I was in ministry where we would say, oh, I won't have a beer while I'm doing X ministry, because what they said was that anybody that was a parishioner could go ahead and take a look at you and go, is that your first beer or is that your 20th beer? Now, in my opinion, in my separate opinion, I always think like that's a terrible problem in the evangelical church. Like, to just assume the worst, right? To assume, like, I don't know if that's your first beer or your 20th beer, so I'm going to judge you as if you're, got a problem and it's some sort of moral issue, right? But for me, the moral issue isn't whether or not you have a first beer or 3 beers. Or it's A, are you drunk? Are you a wrecking ball? And B, are you being a stumbling block? Is your high liberty, it's not a problem for you, but is your high liberty a problem for somebody else? In my experience, there's 2 people where that particular high liberty can be a problem. One is someone in recovery, and, heaven forbid, you don't want to be that person that makes recovery harder for somebody that's really struggling. And then B, the next person that could maybe be struggling with your high liberty is maybe a new Christian that's into legalism. And it kind of reminds me of how he says, when I was with the Jews, I lived under the law. So when I worked for a church, I had to live under the law. And it's dumb and it's stupid and it's frustrating. And it was an act of, I guess, for me, submission. And what I realized is it's a kindness to people that are legalists to not add a stumbling block in that way. Now, granted, there's part of me that is sort of like, I am a button pusher for legalism often. But I would say that it's one of those things where my freedom doesn't always go over my concern for my fellow man and his problems. So whether it's somebody that's legalistic and because they can't get over that offense and they can no longer hear you, or if it's an issue where trying to think of a word, or if it's an issue where somebody has an actual addiction issue and you're making life much harder on them. So my high liberties, my use of my freedom, is one of those things where I might want to put in consideration if there's somebody that has an issue. And this is just, obviously Christian ideals and stuff and thinking, but that's how I always understood this sort of thing. There's a writer named Derek Reb who wrote a song about the gospel. And the song actually kind of goes, whenever you preach the gospel, it's kind of ugly. A lot of people, it's a beautiful, but a lot of people take offense to the gospel. And there's a song called "Nobody Loves Me," and I could just picture the eye rolls of secular people listening, because they're like, "Oh, nobody loves me, Christian persecution," crying. But actually, it was kind of funny because he was kind of using this idea of Luther, tacking the thesis on the wall, but also saying, "I don't care if nobody loves me but you," which is Jesus. Now to some degree, I kind of like the sentiment, but he also caveats it in the song and says that the truth is never sexy, so it's not an easy sell. You can, how does it go? The truth is never sexy. It's not an easy sell. You can dress her like, the, I can't think of the word, but world, basically. The truth is never sexy, and it will never sell. You can dress her like the world, or I don't remember. It was like sexy. You can dress up the truth, but the truth will shock them just as well. So basically, no matter how kindly and Mr. Rogers you present the gospel in itself, this idea that there is one God, and that you need to be reconciled with this God, the gospel in itself is still offensive. And the song goes, "Nobody loves me but you," and it kind of goes on, but you'd have to hear it, because he really does it in a very non-whiny way. But what he's saying is, he follows it up with this verse that is really related to this other verse that I'm going to show you in a moment, and it's going to kind of work its way together. But he follows it up with this other part where he goes, "The truth is never sexy, so it's not an easy sell. You can dress her like the culture, but she'll shock them just as well." And then he says, but he's referring to, she is the gospel, not like calling Jesus a she, but God, she, as in the way you say a boat is a she. She don't need no help to make enemies. She don't need her help to make enemies. I wish I should have looked it up, because I if I was on my laptop I could have but basically it's talking about not adding offense. The gospel doesn't need your help making enemies, because in itself it's offensive to a lot of people. So when you look at your high liberty, well, I have the freedom to do X. Well, Paul in one portion says, I use my freedom, but I also want to be all things to all men. And he doesn't mean like being like inauthentic, but there's certain things where you can adjust and not add offense to the gospel. If dear old grandmother is really upset that you use the F word, you can doctor your language so that you don't give your dear old grandmother a heart attack. It's not worth your freedom of speech to do that. To use coarse language, and I don't mean swear words like the F word or anything like that, because I really don't care. But to use coarse languages, words have usages, right? And the use of a swear word matters. So Paul actually uses a swear word that equals to the word shit. It really does. And how he uses it matters. So words have usage. The other thing is, I do want to point out that you can emotionally and verbally abuse somebody without ever swearing to them. You can seriously demolish people without ever using a swear word. So to me, swear words are or not swearing, that's not at all relevant to Christian or not Christian. It's how you use your words and how you're wielding them that matters. So one of the things is, if your words are causing offense, and as a button pusher, I do like to push buttons, especially for legalists, you have to decide if it's worth it or not. Is this somebody that needs to learn a lesson and be like, no, words have usages, let me explain? Or is this somebody that's just a baby and they're a legalist and you need to kind of coddle them? So you're gonna have to decide for yourself about that. That's one of those things. But also, being aware of the customs and being aware of what people are going through and being sensitive to people's needs, that's important. And so when Paul says be all things to all men, that is literally anybody that I've known that's done mission work and is dealing with people that are from different cultures, different backgrounds, different tragedies, different victories. They really seem to take to heart this whole idea of I need to be all things to all men. What that means is being freaking understanding, listening, understanding. This is something that does matter. Don't listen to evangelical Americans that are completely blinded by the religion of capitalism. Look at Paul's words and try to understand what be all things to all men really is. Also in Corinthians, again, Paul, and there's different versions I was going to show you. I have the right to do anything you say, but not everything is beneficial. I have the right to do anything, but not everything is constructive. Or if you want the English Standard Version, all things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful, but not all things build up. Again, that's kind of in the realm of high liberty, like I was talking about. It's related to high liberty. All things, Lawful, stop barking, baby. Stop barking. I think my husband's home. But it's the idea of having the right to do anything, but not everything is constructive. I like to always say not everything that's legal is moral. What happened, there's been atrocities that have been legal. There's been great immoral actions that have been legal. Not everything that's legal is moral. Not everything that you are allowed to do, if it's a high liberty, is freedom, and it's in the gray. It's neither good or bad, but how you do it could be good or bad. How you and having a beer, because church leadership focuses on that and things like that. Like I just use that as a tangible example. But having a beer in and of itself, as they say, having a beer is neither right or wrong necessarily. If you look at it, is having a beer right or wrong? But having a beer in certain situations could be very inappropriate. It could be very insensitive. It could be adding offense to the gospel. It could be a stumbling block. So these are things that you have to consider if you want to be, Jesus with skin on earth, like the reflection of Jesus, which is extremely difficult to do. But it is always a consideration, right? So words have usages, and how you use them matters. So when I say you can't use the word queer, because when you use the word queer, it's coming out as a slur, maybe take that to heart. Like, be all things to all men. Why add extra offense? Why is that a thing? Same thing with the N-word. Why, just because it's lawful, why is that okay? Why should you add offense to people in distress when it means something very specific and hateful? Why add that extra turmoil? What's the point? Unless that's what you want to do. Hopefully not. So that's my comment about that is, sometimes not everything is beneficial. And be all things to all men. Anyway, that's my comment for today. Meanwhile, while I did talk about this, I did title this Beer and Bible Study, which, again, I don't mind adding offense to certain people on YouTube that get really upset about things. So that being said, thank you. If you've watched this, forgive me, because I am a little bit scatterbrained because I'm tired. And I am going to sign off now.